My daughter-in-law told everyone I was too old and unreliable to babysit my own grandchildren, so she hired an expensive nanny instead of letting me spend time with the kids I'd been helping raise since they were born. What she didn't know was that the nanny she hired was actually a private investigator I'd been paying to document her cocaine addiction and her dangerous behavior around my grandchildren, and I was about to use that evidence to destroy her completely. I'm Frank, I'm 72 years old, and this is the story of how my controlling daughter-in-law tried to cut me out of my grandchildren's lives, but ended up exposing herself as an unfit mother who lost custody of her own kids. Before we continue, please hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting us know where you're tuning in from around the world. You know, there's nothing quite like watching someone dig their own grave while thinking they're building a castle, especially when that someone has been making your life miserable and keeping you away from the people you love most. This story is about family loyalty, parental fitness, and what happens when someone who thinks they hold all the cards discovers that the game was rigged against them from the very beginning. It's about the sweet satisfaction of watching a manipulative person's carefully constructed lies collapse around them, and about the lengths a grandfather will go to protect his grandchildren from their own mother's dangerous choices. Let me start from the beginning. Back when I still believed that my son had married a decent woman who would be a good mother to my future grandchildren, instead of the drug-addicted control freak she turned out to be. I'm a retired fire chief who spent 35 years serving my community and helping people in crisis situations. I've seen every kind of human behavior, from the heroic to the horrific, and I've developed good instincts about people's character and their ability to handle responsibility under pressure. I raised my son Michael as a single father after his mother died in a car accident when he was 8 years old, and I'm proud to say that I did a good job despite the challenges of being a widower with a demanding career in emergency services. Michael grew up to be a responsible, hardworking man who became a successful engineer and seemed to have excellent judgment about most things in life. The one major exception to Michael's otherwise sound decision-making was his choice to marry Amanda Peterson, a woman he met during his final year of college who seemed charming and fun-loving at first, but gradually revealed herself to be selfish, manipulative, and completely unsuited for the responsibilities of marriage and motherhood. Amanda came from a wealthy family and had never worked a real job or faced any significant challenges in her privileged life. She was beautiful in a high-maintenance way that required constant attention and expensive upkeep, and she had the kind of personality that demanded to be the center of attention in every situation. Amanda was used to getting whatever she wanted through a combination of charm, manipulation, and tantrums, and she'd never learned to consider other people's needs or feelings when making decisions about her own behavior. When Michael first introduced me to Amanda, I was polite and welcoming because I wanted to support my son's happiness, and because I hoped that marriage might help her develop more maturity and stability. But I noticed warning signs from the very beginning of their relationship that made me concerned about Amanda's character and her suitability as a long-term partner for Michael. Amanda was demanding and high-maintenance, constantly requiring Michael's attention and becoming jealous whenever he spent time with friends, family, or work responsibilities that didn't revolve around her needs and preferences. She also had expensive tastes and spending habits that seemed to assume Michael would provide her with a luxury lifestyle, without expecting her to contribute anything meaningful to their household income or their relationship responsibilities. Amanda made it clear that she expected to be supported financially while pursuing her various hobbies and interests, which seemed to change frequently, and never resulted in any actual accomplishments or contributions to their shared goals. Most concerning to me was Amanda's attitude toward family relationships and her apparent belief that marriage meant Michael should prioritize her wants and opinions above all other considerations, including his relationship with me and his obligations to extended family members. Amanda seemed to view me as competition for Michael's attention rather than as a loving father who wanted to maintain a close relationship with his son and be involved in his future family's life. She made subtle but persistent efforts to limit the time Michael spent with me and to discourage him from seeking my advice or including me in important decisions about their relationship and their future plans. Despite my concerns about Amanda's character and her effect on my relationship with Michael, I tried to be supportive and welcoming when they got married 3 years after college graduation. I hoped that the responsibilities of marriage might help Amanda mature and develop more consideration for other people's needs, and I was optimistic that becoming part of our family might help her understand the importance of maintaining close family relationships and supporting each other through life's challenges. I also believe that Michael's influence and example might help Amanda become a better person over time, since he'd always been thoughtful and responsible in his approach to relationships and commitments. Unfortunately, marriage seemed to make Amanda's negative qualities worse rather than better, as she became even more demanding and controlling once she had the security of being Michael's wife. Amanda quit her part-time job immediately after their wedding, claiming that she needed to focus on being a good wife and managing their household. But she spent most of her time on social activities, shopping, and pursuing expensive hobbies that contributed nothing to their marriage or their financial stability. She also became increasingly hostile toward me and toward Michael's friends, constantly complaining that they took too much of his time and attention away from her needs and preferences. Amanda's behavior became even more problematic when she became pregnant with their first child 2 years after their marriage. Instead of being excited about becoming a mother and preparing for the responsibilities of parenthood, Amanda seemed primarily focused on the attention and sympathy that pregnancy would bring her, and on the expensive baby gear and nursery furnishings that she insisted were necessary for their child's well-being. Amanda treated pregnancy like a fashion accessory rather than a serious responsibility, constantly posting photos on social media and making demands for special treatment and accommodations that had nothing to do with actual medical needs or the baby's health. When my first grandchild Emma was born, I was overjoyed to become a grandfather and eager to help Michael and Amanda adjust to parenthood in whatever ways would be most useful and supportive. I offered to help with childcare, household tasks, and any other responsibilities that might be challenging for new parents who were learning to balance their careers with the demands of caring for an infant. I'd raised Michael successfully as a single parent, so I had extensive experience with baby care, child development, and the practical aspects of managing household responsibilities while working full-time. I was looking forward to sharing that experience and knowledge with my son and daughter-in-law while building a close relationship with my granddaughter. But Amanda immediately made it clear that she didn't want my help or involvement in Emma's care, claiming that she had her own ideas about parenting and didn't need advice or assistance from someone whose child-rearing experience was decades out of date. Amanda insisted that modern parenting methods were completely different from the approaches I'd used when raising Michael, and that my involvement in Emma's care would be confusing and potentially harmful to the baby's development. She also claimed that having grandparents too involved in childcare could interfere with parents bonding with their children and could create dependency relationships that weren't healthy for families. These objections might have been understandable if Amanda had demonstrated competence and confidence in her own parenting abilities, but she clearly struggled with even basic aspects of infant care and seemed overwhelmed by the responsibilities of motherhood. Amanda frequently complained about being tired and stressed, but she refused offers of help and seemed to resent the fact that caring for Emma required her to focus on someone else's needs rather than her own comfort and entertainment. She also seemed more interested in posting photos and updates about Emma on social media than in actually interacting with her daughter or learning about child development and age-appropriate activities. Despite Amanda's resistance to my involvement in Emma's care, I tried to maintain a relationship with my granddaughter by visiting regularly and offering support in ways that Amanda might find less threatening or intrusive. I would bring gifts and supplies for Emma, help with household tasks that didn't directly involve childcare, and try to spend time with Michael and the baby in ways that wouldn't trigger Amanda's jealousy or controlling behavior. I was careful to respect Amanda's boundaries and parenting decisions, even when I disagreed with them, because I wanted to maintain access to my granddaughter and avoid creating conflicts that might damage my relationship with Michael or Emma. This pattern continued for several years as Michael and Amanda had two more children, my grandson Jake and my younger granddaughter Lily. With each child, Amanda became more possessive and controlling about their care, more resistant to outside help or involvement, and more hostile toward my attempts to build relationships with my grandchildren. Amanda seemed to view grandparent relationships as competition rather than as valuable additions to children's support systems, and she made increasingly unreasonable demands about when and how I could spend time with Emma, Jake, and Lily. She would cancel planned visits at the last minute, impose arbitrary restrictions on activities we could do together, and constantly criticize my interactions with the children as inappropriate or outdated. The situation reached a crisis point about 6 months ago when Amanda announced that she no longer felt comfortable having me babysit the children, claiming that I was too old and out of touch with modern child safety standards to be trusted with their care. Amanda said that she decided to hire a professional nanny who would be better equipped to handle the children's needs and who would follow her specific instructions about their care, education, and activities. She presented this decision as being motivated by concern for the children's well-being and safety, but it was clearly designed to eliminate my involvement in their daily lives and to assert her complete control over their care and upbringing. I was devastated by Amanda's decision to exclude me from my grandchildren's lives, especially since I'd been helping with their care since they were born and had never had any problems or incidents that would justify concerns about my competence or safety. The children loved spending time with me, and I'd always been careful to follow Amanda's rules and guidelines, even when I thought they were unnecessarily restrictive or impractical. I'd never given Amanda any legitimate reason to question my ability to care for Emma, Jake, and Lily, and her sudden decision to hire a nanny, instead of accepting my help, seemed motivated by spite and control, rather than by genuine concern for the children's well-being. When I tried to discuss Amanda's decision with Michael, he was sympathetic but unwilling to challenge his wife's authority over childcare decisions, claiming that Amanda was the primary caregiver and should have the final say about arrangements for the children's care. Michael seemed to understand that Amanda's decision was hurtful and unnecessary, but he was either unable or unwilling to stand up to her demands and advocate for my continued involvement in his children's lives. This response was disappointing but not entirely surprising, since Amanda had been systematically undermining my relationship with Michael for years and had gradually convinced him to prioritize her demands over other family relationships and obligations. But what really concerned me about Amanda's decision to hire a nanny wasn't just the impact on my relationship with my grandchildren. It was what this decision revealed about her priorities and her fitness as a mother. Amanda was choosing to pay a stranger to care for her children, rather than accepting free help from a loving grandfather who had successfully raised their father, and who had extensive experience with childcare and child development. This decision suggested that Amanda cared more about maintaining control and excluding family members than about providing the best possible care for Emma, Jake, and Lily, which raised serious questions about her judgment and her commitment to her children's well-being. I also began to suspect that Amanda's decision to exclude me from the children's lives might be motivated by something more than simple control issues and family conflicts. Amanda had always been secretive about her activities and defensive about her privacy, but her behavior had become increasingly erratic and suspicious over the past year. She would disappear for hours at a time without explanation, make expensive purchases that she couldn't account for, and display mood swings and energy levels that seemed inconsistent with normal stress or fatigue from parenting responsibilities. Amanda's appearance had also changed in subtle ways that suggested possible substance abuse, including weight loss, changes in her skin and hair quality, and nervous habits that hadn't been present in earlier years. These observations, combined with Amanda's sudden determination to exclude me from the children's lives, made me wonder whether she was trying to hide dangerous or illegal behavior that would be obvious to someone with my background in emergency services and crisis response. During my career as a fire chief, I'd responded to countless calls involving drug overdoses, domestic violence, and child endangerment situations, and I'd learned to recognize the warning signs of substance abuse and the ways that addicts try to hide their behavior from family members and authorities. Amanda's recent behavior and her insistence on controlling access to the children fit patterns I'd seen in cases where parents were using drugs and trying to prevent family members from discovering their addiction and reporting it to Child Protective Services. If Amanda was indeed using drugs, her decision to hire a nanny instead of accepting my help would make perfect sense, since a paid employee would be less likely to recognize signs of substance abuse or to report concerns about the children's safety to family members or authorities. A nanny would also be easier to manipulate or replace if she became too observant or asked uncomfortable questions about Amanda's behavior or the household's daily routines. But a grandfather with experience in emergency services and child welfare would be much more difficult to deceive and much more likely to recognize dangerous situations and take action to protect the children. This analysis convinced me that I needed to investigate Amanda's behavior more thoroughly and gather evidence about her fitness as a mother and her ability to provide safe care for my grandchildren. If Amanda was using drugs or engaging in other dangerous behavior around Emma, Jake, and Lily, I had a moral and legal obligation to document that behavior and take action to protect the children, even if it meant confronting Michael and potentially destroying my relationship with him and his family. The safety and well-being of my grandchildren had to take priority over family harmony and my own desire to maintain peaceful relationships with everyone involved. After considering various approaches to investigating Amanda's behavior, I decided to hire a private investigator who specialized in child custody and family law cases, with specific experience in documenting parental fitness and substance abuse issues. I contacted Rebecca Martinez, a former police detective who'd started her own investigation agency after retiring from law enforcement, and I explained my concerns about Amanda's behavior and my need for professional documentation of any dangerous or illegal activities that might affect my grandchildren's safety. Rebecca had extensive experience in cases involving suspected child endangerment and substance abuse, and she understood the legal requirements for gathering evidence that could be used in custody proceedings or Child Protective Services investigations. Rebecca and I developed a comprehensive plan for investigating Amanda's activities and documenting any evidence of substance abuse or other dangerous behavior that might justify concerns about the children's safety. The investigation would include surveillance of Amanda's daily activities, documentation of her contacts and associates, and if possible, direct observation of her behavior around the children and evidence of drug use or other illegal activities. Rebecca explained that this type of investigation required patience and careful planning, since we needed to gather clear and convincing evidence that would stand up to legal scrutiny and couldn't be dismissed as speculation or family conflicts. The breakthrough in our investigation came when Rebecca suggested that the most effective way to observe Amanda's behavior around the children would be to have Rebecca pose as a nanny and apply for the childcare position that Amanda had advertised. This approach would give Rebecca direct access to the household and the children, allowing her to observe Amanda's daily routines, her interactions with Emma, Jake, and Lily, and any evidence of substance abuse or other dangerous behavior that might not be visible during external surveillance. Rebecca had the qualifications and experience to work as a professional nanny, and her background in law enforcement made her well-equipped to recognize and document signs of child endangerment or parental unfitness. When Amanda posted advertisements for a nanny position, Rebecca applied using a carefully constructed resume and references that presented her as an experienced childcare professional with excellent qualifications and stellar recommendations from previous employers. Rebecca's application stood out from other candidates because of her apparent experience, her professional presentation, and her willingness to work for the salary Amanda was offering, while following her detailed instructions about the children's care and household routines. Amanda was impressed with Rebecca's credentials and her interview performance, and she hired Rebecca without conducting the thorough background checks that might have revealed her true identity and her connection to me. Amanda's failure to properly vet the person she was hiring to care for her children was itself evidence of poor judgment and inadequate concern for her children's safety, since professional childcare providers should always be thoroughly screened, and their references should always be verified independently. A responsible parent would never hire a nanny based solely on a resume and a single interview, especially not someone who would have unsupervised access to young children and intimate knowledge of the family's daily routines and personal information. Amanda's casual approach to hiring childcare reflected the same lack of serious consideration for her children's well-being that had characterized her approach to parenting from the beginning. Once Rebecca began working as Amanda's nanny, she was able to observe and document Amanda's behavior in ways that would have been impossible through external surveillance alone. Rebecca had daily access to the household and could observe Amanda's interactions with the children, her daily routines and habits, and any evidence of substance abuse or other dangerous activities that might affect the children's safety and well-being. Rebecca was also able to assess the children's physical and emotional condition, their living environment, and the overall quality of care they were receiving from their mother. What Rebecca discovered during her first week working in Amanda's household was both shocking and deeply disturbing, confirming my worst fears about Amanda's fitness as a mother and the potential danger to my grandchildren's safety. Rebecca documented clear evidence that Amanda was regularly using cocaine and other illegal substances, often while the children were in her care, and sometimes in locations where the children could easily access dangerous drugs or drug paraphernalia. Amanda would use drugs in the bathroom, her bedroom, and even in the kitchen while preparing meals for the children, showing a complete disregard for their safety and well-being. Rebecca also observed that Amanda's drug use significantly impaired her ability to care for Emma, Jake, and Lily appropriately, as she would become inattentive, agitated, or completely unresponsive during periods when she was under the influence of cocaine or recovering from its effects. Amanda would leave the children unsupervised for extended periods while she was using drugs or sleeping off their effects, and she would become impatient and sometimes verbally abusive when the children needed attention or care during times when she was impaired or craving more drugs. The children clearly recognized that their mother's behavior was unpredictable and frightening, and they had learned to avoid asking for help or attention when Amanda was displaying signs of drug use or withdrawal. Rebecca documented numerous incidents where Amanda endangered the children through her impaired judgment and inattention to their basic safety needs. Amanda would drive while under the influence of drugs with the children in the car, leave dangerous substances and drug paraphernalia where the children could access them, and fail to provide adequate supervision when the children were playing or engaging in activities that required adult oversight. On multiple occasions, Rebecca observed Amanda becoming so impaired that she was unable to respond appropriately to the children's needs for food, medical attention, or basic care, leaving Rebecca to handle emergency situations and provide care that should have been Amanda's responsibility as their mother. Perhaps most disturbing was Rebecca's observation that Amanda was exposing the children to dangerous people and situations related to her drug use, including having drug dealers and other criminals in the house while the children were present, and taking the children with her to locations where drug transactions were taking place. Amanda seemed completely unaware of the danger she was creating for Emma, Jake, and Lily, or completely indifferent to their safety, as long as she could continue accessing the drugs she needed to feed her addiction. The children were being raised in an environment where illegal drug use was normalized, and where their basic safety and well-being were secondary to their mother's addiction and her need to maintain access to controlled substances. After 2 weeks of documenting Amanda's drug use and its impact on the children's safety and well-being, Rebecca had gathered overwhelming evidence that Amanda was an unfit mother who was endangering her children through her substance abuse and her failure to provide appropriate care and supervision. Rebecca had photographs, video recordings, and detailed written documentation of specific incidents where Amanda's drug use had created dangerous situations for the children, or had prevented her from providing adequate care for their basic needs. This evidence clearly demonstrated that Emma, Jake, and Lily were living in an unsafe environment and were at risk of serious harm if they continued to remain in Amanda's care without intervention from authorities or family members. Rebecca also documented evidence that Amanda was funding her drug addiction through theft and fraud, including stealing money from Michael's accounts, forging his signature on checks and financial documents, and selling household items and gifts that belonged to the children or to other family members. Amanda's addiction had apparently progressed to the point where she was willing to steal from her own family and compromise her household's financial stability in order to pay for drugs, which suggested that her substance abuse problem was severe and was likely to continue escalating without professional intervention and treatment. This financial fraud also represented additional crimes that could be prosecuted independently of the child endangerment issues, and it provided further evidence of Amanda's unfitness as a parent and as a responsible member of society. The evidence gathered by Rebecca during her investigation was more comprehensive and more damaging than I had expected, even though I'd suspected that Amanda was using drugs and creating dangerous situations for my grandchildren. The scope of Amanda's addiction and the extent of her disregard for the children's safety was shocking even to someone with my background in emergency services and crisis response. Amanda wasn't just occasionally using drugs while the children were asleep or in other people's care. She was maintaining an active addiction that affected her behavior and judgment throughout most of each day, creating constant danger for Emma, Jake, and Lily, and preventing her from providing even basic levels of appropriate parental care. After reviewing all of the evidence that Rebecca had gathered, I knew that I had to take immediate action to protect my grandchildren and to ensure that Amanda's dangerous behavior was stopped before the children were seriously injured or permanently traumatized by their experiences in her care. I also knew that confronting Amanda directly or sharing the evidence with Michael would likely result in Amanda destroying evidence, relocating with the children, or taking other actions that would make it more difficult to protect Emma, Jake, and Lily from continued harm. I needed to involve authorities who had the legal power to remove the children from danger, and to ensure that Amanda received appropriate consequences for her criminal behavior and her failure to provide safe care for her children. I contacted the local Child Protective Services office and arranged to meet with a caseworker who specialized in substance abuse and child endangerment cases. I explained my concerns about Amanda's fitness as a mother and provided copies of all the evidence that Rebecca had gathered during her investigation, including photographs, video recordings, and detailed documentation of specific incidents where Amanda's drug use had created dangerous situations for the children. The caseworker was shocked by the extent and clarity of the evidence I was able to provide, and she immediately began proceedings to remove Emma, Jake, and Lily from Amanda's care, and to investigate her for criminal charges related to child endangerment and substance abuse. I also contacted local law enforcement and provided them with evidence of Amanda's drug use and her theft and fraud activities, which resulted in the issuance of search warrants and arrest warrants that would allow police to search Amanda's home for drugs and stolen property, and to arrest her for multiple criminal charges. The coordination between Child Protective Services and law enforcement ensured that the children would be removed from danger at the same time that Amanda was arrested for her crimes, preventing her from fleeing with the children or destroying evidence that could be used in criminal proceedings against her. The intervention happened on a Thursday morning when Rebecca was working in Amanda's household and could ensure that the children were safe and could provide immediate care for them during the crisis. Child Protective Services workers arrived first and took custody of Emma, Jake, and Lily, explaining to them that they were being taken to a safe place where they would be cared for while the adults sorted out some problems in their family. The children were confused and frightened by this sudden change, but they seemed to understand that something had been wrong in their household and that they were being protected from danger rather than being punished for something they had done. Police officers arrived shortly after the children were removed and arrested Amanda on charges of child endangerment, possession of controlled substances, theft, and fraud. Amanda was caught completely off guard by the arrests and the discovery that her nanny was actually a private investigator who had been documenting her criminal behavior for weeks. Amanda's reaction to being exposed and arrested was a mixture of shock, rage, and desperate attempts to deny or minimize her behavior and its impact on the children. She tried to claim that the evidence against her had been fabricated or taken out of context, but the comprehensive documentation provided by Rebecca made it impossible for Amanda to credibly deny her drug use or her failure to provide safe care for Emma, Jake, and Lily. When Michael learned about Amanda's arrest and the evidence of her drug use and child endangerment, he was devastated, but also relieved to finally understand why his family life had become increasingly chaotic and stressful over the past year. Michael had noticed changes in Amanda's behavior and their household's atmosphere, but he'd attributed these changes to normal stress from parenting and financial pressures rather than to substance abuse and criminal activity. Learning about Amanda's addiction and her dangerous behavior around the children helped Michael understand why I'd been excluded from their lives, and why Amanda had been so secretive and controlling about access to the children and information about their daily routines. Michael was grateful that I'd taken action to protect Emma, Jake, and Lily, even though the investigation had required him to confront painful truths about his wife's character and behavior. Michael immediately filed for divorce and requested full custody of the children, using the evidence of Amanda's substance abuse and child endangerment to support his petition for sole parental rights and supervised visitation restrictions for Amanda. Michael also requested that I be given formal recognition as the children's primary caregiver and guardian, acknowledging my role in protecting them from their mother's dangerous behavior and my qualifications to provide stable, safe care for them while he continued working and dealing with the legal and financial consequences of Amanda's crimes. The family court proceedings moved quickly given the clear evidence of Amanda's unfitness as a parent and the immediate danger to the children's safety and well-being. Amanda's attempts to contest the custody arrangements and to minimize her responsibility for endangering the children were unsuccessful because the evidence gathered by Rebecca was so comprehensive and convincing. The court found that Amanda had repeatedly endangered her children through her substance abuse and her failure to provide appropriate supervision and care, and that she had demonstrated such poor judgment and such disregard for her children's well-being that supervised visitation was necessary to protect them from further harm. Amanda was ordered to complete residential drug treatment and to demonstrate sustained sobriety before being allowed any unsupervised contact with Emma, Jake, and Lily. The court also ordered Amanda to pay restitution for the money she'd stolen from Michael and to cover the costs of the children's care and therapy while they recovered from the trauma of living in an unsafe environment. Amanda's parental rights were severely restricted, and she was required to prove her fitness as a mother through extensive evaluation and treatment before the court would consider expanding her visitation or custody arrangements. The criminal proceedings against Amanda resulted in convictions on multiple charges related to her drug use, theft, and child endangerment activities. Amanda was sentenced to 2 years in state prison followed by 5 years of supervised probation, during which she would be required to maintain sobriety, attend regular drug testing, and comply with all court orders related to her children's care and her financial obligations to her family. Amanda's criminal convictions also created a permanent record that would affect her future employment opportunities, her ability to access certain services and benefits, and her parental rights in any future relationships or family situations. The legal consequences of Amanda's actions were severe and long-lasting, reflecting the seriousness of her crimes and the harm she'd caused to her children and family. 6 months after Amanda's arrest and conviction, Emma, Jake, and Lily are thriving in the stable, safe environment that Michael and I have created for them. The children are living with Michael in a new home, and I have a formal role as their primary caregiver during times when Michael is working or traveling for business. The children have adjusted well to their new living arrangements, and seem relieved to be free from the chaos and danger that characterized their life with Amanda. Emma, Jake, and Lily are receiving therapy to help them process their experiences and develop healthy coping strategies for dealing with the trauma of having an addicted parent. And they're making good progress in rebuilding their sense of security and trust in the adults who care for them. I'm grateful beyond words to have the opportunity to be actively involved in my grandchildren's lives again, and to know that they're safe from the dangers that Amanda's addiction and poor judgment had created for them. The experience has strengthened my relationship with Michael, who now understands the importance of family support systems and the value of having multiple adults who are committed to children's well-being and safety. Michael has also gained a deeper appreciation for the warning signs of substance abuse and the ways that addiction can destroy families, and he's committed to maintaining the vigilance and support systems that will help protect Emma, Jake, and Lily from similar dangers in the future. The investigation and legal proceedings also vindicated my concerns about Amanda's fitness as a mother, and proved that my exclusion from the children's lives had been motivated by Amanda's need to hide her dangerous and illegal behavior rather than by legitimate concerns about my ability to provide safe, appropriate care for my grandchildren. Rebecca's work as an undercover nanny provided irrefutable evidence that Amanda was endangering her children, and that my involvement in their care would have been beneficial rather than harmful to their development and well-being. The irony that Amanda's own decision to hire a nanny led directly to her exposure and arrest was particularly satisfying, since it demonstrated that her attempts to control and manipulate the situation had ultimately backfired and destroyed everything she'd been trying to protect. As for Rebecca, she's become a trusted friend and ally who continues to work with our family to ensure the children's ongoing safety and to monitor any potential threats to their well-being. Rebecca's professional expertise and her genuine care for Emma, Jake, and Lily have been invaluable during this difficult transition, and her work has helped our family understand the importance of maintaining appropriate boundaries and safety measures, even within family relationships. Rebecca has also helped us develop strategies for recognizing and responding to warning signs of substance abuse or other dangerous behavior, so that we'll be better prepared to protect the children from any future threats to their safety and stability. The experience with Amanda has taught me valuable lessons about the importance of trusting my instincts about people's character and behavior, even when those instincts conflict with my desire to maintain family harmony and avoid confrontation. Amanda's addiction and her dangerous behavior around the children had been escalating for months or possibly years before I took action to investigate and document her unfitness as a parent. If I'd acted on my concerns earlier, the children might have been spared some of the trauma and danger they experienced while living in Amanda's care, and Michael might have been able to address Amanda's problems before they became so severe and destructive. I also learned about the importance of having professional resources and legal support when dealing with suspected child abuse or endangerment, since family members often lack the expertise and authority necessary to protect children from dangerous situations. Rebecca's work as a private investigator provided the kind of comprehensive, legally admissible evidence that was necessary to convince authorities to take action and to ensure that Amanda faced appropriate consequences for her behavior. Without professional documentation of Amanda's crimes and their impact on the children, my concerns about her fitness as a mother might have been dismissed as family conflicts or grandfather's worries rather than legitimate child safety issues. The most important lesson from this experience is that protecting children from harm must take priority over maintaining family relationships or avoiding conflict with people whose behavior threatens children's safety and well-being. Amanda's addiction and her dangerous behavior around Emma, Jake, and Lily required immediate intervention, regardless of the impact on family dynamics or the consequences for Amanda's relationship with Michael and the children. Children cannot protect themselves from addicted or abusive parents, and adults who recognize dangerous situations have moral and legal obligations to take action even when doing so is difficult or creates family conflicts. Today, I'm proud of the role I played in protecting my grandchildren from their mother's dangerous behavior, and I'm grateful that Emma, Jake, and Lily are growing up in a safe, stable environment where their needs and well-being are the top priority. The children are developing close relationships with both Michael and me, and they're learning that families should be sources of support and protection rather than chaos and danger. They're also learning that adults who care about them will take action to keep them safe, even when doing so requires difficult decisions and confrontations with people who aren't acting in their best interests. Amanda's conviction and imprisonment have removed the immediate threat to the children's safety, but our family remains vigilant about protecting Emma, Jake, and Lily from any future dangers or attempts by Amanda to regain unsupervised access to them before she's demonstrated genuine rehabilitation and fitness as a parent. The children's safety and well-being will always be our primary concern, and we're committed to maintaining the support systems and protective measures that will help them grow up healthy, happy, and secure in the knowledge that they're loved and protected by adults who put their needs first. If there's one message I want people to take from this story, it's that children's safety must always take priority over adult relationships and family harmony, and that recognizing signs of substance abuse or child endangerment requires immediate action rather than hope that problems will resolve themselves over time. Addiction is a progressive disease that typically gets worse rather than better without professional intervention, and children who live with addicted parents are at constant risk of serious harm that can have lifelong consequences for their physical and emotional development. Adults who suspect that children are being endangered by substance abuse or other dangerous behavior have resources available to help them investigate their concerns and take appropriate action to protect vulnerable children from harm. My experience also demonstrates that hiring private investigators and working with child protective services and law enforcement agencies can provide effective protection for children when family members recognize dangerous situations, but lack the authority or expertise to address them independently. Professional investigators like Rebecca have the training and resources necessary to gather legally admissible evidence of child endangerment, and they can work with authorities to ensure that children are removed from dangerous situations and that dangerous parents face appropriate consequences for their behavior. These resources are available to any family member or community member who has legitimate concerns about children's safety and well-being. Finally, I want to emphasize that grandparents and other extended family members can play crucial roles in protecting children from dangerous situations and providing stable, loving care when parents are unable or unwilling to meet their children's needs appropriately. My relationship with Emma, Jake, and Lily has been strengthened by our shared experience of overcoming Amanda's dangerous behavior and building a safe, supportive family environment together. The children have learned that they can count on me to protect them and care for them, and I've learned that being a grandfather involves not just love and fun activities, but also the responsibility to take action when children's safety and well-being are threatened by anyone, including their own parents. Amanda thought she could exclude me from my grandchildren's lives, and hide her dangerous behavior from family members who might recognize the signs of addiction and take action to protect the children. Instead, her attempts to control and manipulate the situation led directly to her exposure, conviction, and loss of custody, while strengthening the very family relationships she'd been trying to destroy. The nanny she hired to keep me away from the children turned out to be the key to documenting her unfitness as a parent and ensuring that Emma, Jake, and Lily would be protected from her dangerous behavior. Sometimes justice comes in the most unexpected packages, and sometimes the very actions that people take to protect their secrets end up being the actions that expose them completely. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more incredible tales of family justice and protection. Share your thoughts about this grandfather's fight to protect his grandchildren in the comments below. And don't forget to check out our next video for another amazing story of someone who refused to let family members get away with dangerous behavior.